Joining us now is Matt Doherty. He now is the Managing Director for Workforce Risk Management at SICK, but in a previous life ran the National Threat Assessment Center for the U.S. Secret Service, which has done a lot of work on school shootings over the years. Matt, I know it's still very early in this particular shooting to understand. The 18-year-old suspect is deceased. Tell us what happens in these early minutes and hours there at the scene and what we can learn from previous school shootings.
Absolutely. First is the post-shooting, and sorry to be here under these circumstances, but thanks for having me. What they've done is set up a family reunification center. Even though it's a small, likely a small police department, they are taught since the Columbine shooting, since 1999, to instantly respond to any shots at a school. This is clearly a case of targeted violence where a known or knowable assailant selected their target prior to the attack. So they obviously and likely heroically, police responded to the shooting. And unfortunately, if this is true to be a suicide, either by law enforcement or self-inflicted, this is typical of how these cases go down in the response.
You know, one of the things that struck me as they were talking when they said it's a school holding second, third, and fourth graders, and I think that's difficult for any parent to hear. Talk about the type of training that goes into a school with elementary, you know, small, young children or children of this age who are 7, 8, 9 years old, and they're trying to kind of figure their way around. So talk to me about how you train those students and how you train their teachers. What goes on?
It is much different than a workplace where you have adults that can run, hide, or fight, and that's endorsed by the Department of Homeland Security. Those teachers undoubtedly have been taught about active assailant and active shooter, and they have the care for those kids. So usually hiding and locking the door, barricading yourself is usually the best option. I would not be surprised to hear heroic stories coming out of the school faculty on how they were able to hide while the shooting was going on. Again, in active assailant cases like this, the goal of the shooter is to, unfortunately and graphically, kill as many people as possible in the shortest amount of time. So hiding is of the utmost importance with that type of grade. I would think that most of, or a good deal of the classrooms would have a bathroom due to the ages of the kids. And that would be a good hiding place to barricade themselves in.
Matt, we're just getting a few more nuggets of information in from the governor of Texas, who told reporters a moment ago that the gunman was a resident of the community and entered the school with a handgun and possibly a rifle when that person opened fire. Again, that's according to the governor of Texas. As we know, there's often kind of a cloud of information in these early hours after an incident like this. And I was interested a couple of years ago, your old employer, the National Threat Assessment Center, actually put out a very detailed report looking at school shootings in America over the years. And I wonder if you could tell me some of the common threads that connected a lot of the school shootings.
Absolutely, and it usually holds true. The vast majority of shooters in the study rarely directed their threat towards the target or the law enforcement. In other words, the mere lack of a direct threat doesn't mean that person isn't a danger. So they didn't make a threat, oftentimes, either directed towards the target or law enforcement. They had a variety of motives and life stressors. In this case, it may have been suicide, bringing national attention to a perceived wrong, or some type of grievance. The key, I'd be very curious in the upcoming days and hours whether that person was part of a threat assessment process. And by that, I mean an interdisciplinary process. Most school systems now have a threat assessment process. And the important thing about that is you'll start to see, it would not surprise me, that other people were concerned about the student's behavior prior to the attack. In the vast majority of the cases that we studied at the Secret Service and studied by the FBI in separate studies, the vast majority of these shooters, their behavior concerned others prior to the attack. The other thing, you heard about the weapons, and I'm not here to get into a debate about gun control, but usually these weapons are legally obtained. And that's why we always like to hit home is if this person suffered from untreated mental health issues, the one vehicle to be used is a court-ordered mental health treatment to get the weapons taken away. I would not be surprised if these weapons were legally obtained at the time and that he did not have a court-ordered mental health treatment, even though it may have been warranted in this case.
Okay. Talk about the coming days, what they're like for the families that are dealing with this, the community of Uvalde, Texas, as they hear about some of the victims who may be relatives or friends of theirs.
Absolutely, and that's why the investment in threat assessment is well worth it. You can't predict violence, but you certainly can prevent it. You're going to see at that family reunification center, you'll start seeing a lot of recriminations, without a doubt. I think that there'll be some questions of whether he was submitted to a threat assessment process, if he did attend a high school or where he's from, and law enforcement and the mental health community will be under scrutiny, even though it's a tough call to prevent violence. The tools are limited, but I'll be very curious about the recriminations. And you'll start seeing other people knowing about his intentions, or at least having fears of his intentions. And if that occurs, you'll start seeing even more recriminations, especially in a small community.
Where everybody knows everybody.
Yes.
Already, Matt Doherty, who is with SICICH now, but used to run the National Threat Assessment Center for the Secret Service. We appreciate your expertise. Thank you for getting on with us under the circumstances.
Thank you.